At my son's kindergarten play, my husband walked in with his mistress and let her take the front row seat meant for me as if she were the real mother. She looked me up and down, smiled, and whispered, "Stand in the back. At least today you'll look less like the nanny." My husband sat beside her and said nothing. I swallowed the humiliation and stood beneath the exit sign, but when my 5-year-old son stepped onto the stage, gripped the microphone, and spoke one innocent sentence, her smile vanished in front of everyone. "Thank you so much for being here. It genuinely means everything to me. Drop a comment and tell me where are you watching from. Your country, your city, I want to know." Also, this story contains fictional elements created for entertainment and storytelling purposes. Any similarity to actual names or places is purely coincidental, but the message inside it, that part is absolutely worth keeping. That Friday morning in early June, Atlanta felt like a promise, golden light filtering through the curtains and the scent of gardenias drifting in. I'd been awake since 5:30 in my Buckhead apartment, holding on to one clear thought: whatever my ex-husband and his lawyers had planned today still belonged to my 5-year-old son, Oliver. I chose a simple navy blue dress. I just wanted to look like his mom. I arrived at Maplewood Academy at 9:35 for the spring show. The small, warm auditorium held about 150 folding chairs, facing a stage decorated with a hand-painted sun and a border of colorful handprints. Finding the front row, I sat where Oliver and I had placed his handmade seat card the evening before. He had written "Mommy" in shaky red crayon next to a lopsided heart. "Mommy, sit in the front so I can see you, okay?" Promise, he had asked the night before, holding my hands like a tiny judge. I promise, I'd replied. At 9:42, the atmosphere shifted. Derek walked in wearing the gray suit I had helped him choose 2 years ago before I knew who he truly was. He ignored me completely. Half a step behind him was Brittany Caldwell, a lifestyle influencer with 120,000 followers, already holding her phone at shoulder height. Brittany's eyes locked onto the front row. Without hesitation, she picked up Oliver's handmade card, folded it in half, and dropped it into her purse like a useless receipt. My chest tightened, and I stood up immediately. "That has my name on it," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Oliver made that for me." Brittany turned, flashing a practiced, deliberate smile. She leaned in close, ensuring only I could hear. "Stand in the back, honey. You'll look less like the nanny that way." She let out a soft laugh and sat down in my seat. Rage rushed to my teeth, but I swallowed it. Not here, not today. Derek simply opened his program, pretending nothing was happening. From the third row, my best friend Jess Moore started to stand, her jaw tight with fury. I shook my head slightly, signaling her to stop. She sat back down, gripping her bag until her knuckles turned white. Behind them, Eleanor Haynes, a retired schoolteacher, shifted in her seat. I noticed her phone resting in her lap screen, dark but angled upward. She was recording everything. I picked up the camera I'd borrowed from Jess. Refusing to let my hands shake or give Brittany the reaction she wanted, I walked to the very back of the auditorium and stood beneath the green exit sign. Brittany glanced back once, wearing a smug, victorious smile. Looking at her, the anger inside me crystallized into something cold, still, and absolute. I pressed my back against the wall, watching the stage. At that moment, I didn't know what Oliver had been working on after school for the past 2 weeks. I didn't know that my son had quietly asked his teacher, Ms. Walsh, for a special moment of his own after the official script ended. I had no idea that a 5-year-old boy was about to change everything. Standing under that exit sign, Brittany's live stream blinking red from the front row. 4,000 strangers watching a room that had no idea it was being performed for. I did the only thing I knew how to do when I needed to hold myself together. I went back to the beginning. Not because the beginning was beautiful, though parts of it were. I went back because I needed to understand one more time exactly how I got to this back wall and why I was still standing on my own 2 feet instead of walking out that door entirely. I met Derek Harmon in Athens, Georgia in the fall of 2019. I was 22, finishing my last semester of a music education degree at UGA, student teaching at a middle school where 37th graders had collectively decided that recorder practice was a form of personal combat. Derek was 26 working in private equity in Atlanta, and he drove up to Athens 3 times in 2 months just to take me to dinner. You drove 3 hours for pasta? I said the second time, laughing across a table at a little Italian place on Clayton Street. He reached across and caught my wine glass before it tipped quick smooth, not even looking at his own hand. I drove 3 hours for you, he said. The pasta's fine. I laughed so hard my whole face hurt. I remember thinking, this man is fast. This man pays attention. He was the kind of person who remembered everything. The names of my students. The piece I was struggling through on the practice piano in the music building. Exactly how I took my coffee, no sugar, a little too hot, always in a real mug. My mother Linda liked him from the first moment she met him. She stood in our kitchen afterward drying a dish that was already dry and said, "He's charming, baby, real charming. Just make sure he loves you out loud as much as he loves the idea of you." I kissed her on the cheek and told her she worried too much. Jess Moore, my college roommate, and the most direct human being I had ever met in my life, sat across from me at brunch 2 weeks before the wedding, looking at me over her mimosa, with an expression I had never quite seen on her face before. "I love you," she said. "You know that, right?" "But," I said, because I'd known Jess long enough to hear the but coming. She set her glass down. "There's something about him I can't name. I've been trying to figure it out for 8 months, and I still can't land on what it is." She looked at me directly, the way Jess always did when she was saying something she needed me to actually hear. "Just keep your own bank account, okay? Just do that one thing for me." I told her she was being dramatic. I opened a joint account with Derek 3 weeks after the wedding. We got married in September 2020. Small ceremony. Backyard of my parents' house in Decatur. White string lights, my cousin on acoustic guitar. In every single photo from that day, I am beaming so wide, my face looks like it might split open from sheer joy. Derek is looking at me the way certain men look at certain things, like something they've already decided to keep. And then the world collapsed. March 2020 hit like a freight train nobody saw coming. I was 31 weeks pregnant when the schools shut down, when the grocery store shelves went bare overnight, when the whole country suddenly understood that everything had been running on an assumption of stability, and that assumption had always been fragile. Derek worked from home. I watched the news and grew larger and tried to believe we were going to be fine. Oliver came early. Saturday, March 14th. 2:47 in the morning. The contractions started after midnight, and by the time I understood they were real and close and absolutely not stopping, it was past 1 a.m. I called Derek. He'd been sleeping in the guest room for 2 weeks by then. "Sleeping better in there," he'd said, and he grabbed his keys and drove me to Piedmont, Atlanta. The hospital had locked down its visitor policy 3 days earlier. One support person per patient, no exceptions. Derek sat in the waiting room. A labor and delivery nurse named Grace. I still remember her name. I will always remember her name. Held my hand through every single contraction and told me I was doing great in a voice so steady it made me want to sob with gratitude. I pushed for 40 minutes. At 2:47 a.m., Oliver Andrew Harmon came into the world at 5 pounds and 9 ounces, screaming at the absolute top of his very small lungs, and I was the first person to hold him. I called Derek's cell 3 times. No answer. A nurse went to the waiting room to find him. He walked in over 3 hours after our son was born. Looking at him, the fog of my exhaustion instantly cleared, replaced by a cold, sharp realization. He didn't look like a terrified new father who had spent the night pacing a hospital waiting room. He looked immaculate, put together, and entirely detached from the miracle that had just happened in that room. "I'm so sorry, baby," he said, delivering the words with the practiced ease of a corporate apology. "I fell asleep in the car." I was holding our newborn son, running on pure survival instinct, but my mind registered every single lie in his voice. I chose to file it away back then, covering up my doubts because I desperately needed to believe my world was safe. Not hospital sanitizer. Not anything I recognized as mine. I filed it. I pressed it somewhere deep and covered it up because I was 23 hours exhausted and holding a 5-pound baby who needed me to believe the world was safe. So I believed the world was safe. That is what you do when the alternative is something you are not ready to look at. "I named him," I said, "Oliver Andrew, after my grandfather." Derek pulled back slightly and looked at me. "That's a great name," he said. He said it the way he approved project budgets. Measured. Final. Satisfied. Standing at the back of that auditorium 6 years later, the exit sign buzzing softly above my head, Brittany Caldwell's red live stream light blinking in the front row. I finally had a name for the expression I had first seen on Derek's face that morning at 6:13. He had been managing me. He had walked into that delivery room already managing me, already performing the role he needed me to believe in, already calculating exactly what version of himself I needed to see. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't discover until a Tuesday night in January, when he left his laptop screen unlocked and walked out of the room, was that Brittany Caldwell hadn't come along after our marriage started falling apart. She was the reason it was always from the very beginning going to end. Grace was the kind of nurse who held your hand without being asked. That's the first thing I think about when I go back to that night. Not the pain, not the fear, not the way the hospital hallways smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. I think about Grace's hand around mine during every contraction, steady and warm, and her voice saying, "You're doing great, Claire. You're doing so great." In a tone so calm it felt like a lifeline somebody had thrown me across a very dark stretch of water. Derek was in the waiting room. One support person per patient hospital policy since the lockdown 3 days earlier. I hadn't argued. I hadn't had the energy to argue. I pushed for 40 minutes. At 2:47 in the morning, Oliver Andrew Harmon came into the world screaming with everything he had, and the sound of it, that small, furious, alive sound, cracked something open in my chest that has never fully closed since. Grace laid him on my chest, and I pressed my lips to the top of his head, and I said out loud to nobody in particular, hi, baby, I've got you. I called Derek 3 times, straight to voicemail all three. Should I go get him from the waiting room? Grace asked, watching my face carefully. Please, I said without looking up from Oliver. She came back alone. He's not there, she said, keeping her voice gentle. He might have stepped outside. I'll try again in a bit. I kept my eyes on my son's face. Okay, I said, okay. Derek walked in at 6:13 in the morning. I heard the door before I saw him, that soft push of air, the click of the latch. I looked up, and my husband was standing in the doorway, in a pressed Oxford shirt, hair neatly combed, looking like a man who had just arrived for an early meeting, rather than a man who had spent the night 4 floors below his wife, while she brought their child into the world alone. Hey, he said softly, crossing the room. He hugged me with Oliver still against my chest, careful measured. Pressed his lips to my forehead. I'm so sorry, baby. I fell asleep in the car. I don't know how it happened. I'm so sorry. My heart did something complicated and quiet. I looked at his shirt, pressed, the collar crisp, not a single wrinkle from sitting in a car seat for 4.5 hours. My brain registered this the way it registers things when it's running on no sleep, and pure adrenaline quietly without drama filing it somewhere it could look at later. And then there was the smell, faint, floral, something soft and warm that was absolutely not hospital sanitizer and absolutely not anything I owned. It drifted off the collar of that pressed shirt for just a second before Derek straightened up, and my stomach dropped so fast I felt it in my knees. Where were you? The words came out before I could stop them. Derek blinked. The parking garage, I told you. I fell. The shirt, I said. He looked down at himself, then back at me, and something moved through his expression so quickly I almost missed it. Almost. What about it? You can't sleep in a car for 4 hours and wake up with a pressed shirt, Derek. His face rearranged itself into concern. Soft, patient, the expression of a man dealing with an exhausted wife who had just been through something enormous. Claire, he sat on the edge of the bed. You just gave birth. You're exhausted. Please don't do this right now. And just like that, the ground shifted under me. Because he was right that I was exhausted. He was right that I had just been through something enormous. And I was holding 5 pounds and 9 ounces of the most important thing that had ever happened to me, and Oliver needed me present, and the alternative, the thing I would have to do if I kept pulling at this thread, was something I was nowhere near ready to look at. So I let it go. I pressed my cheek against Oliver's head, and I breathed him in, and I let Derek sit on the edge of the bed and be sorry in his careful, managed way. And I told myself, Stress exhaustion. I'm imagining things. The smell was the hospital people, borrow each other's clothes at work all the time. Stop. I was so good at that back then, talking myself down off the ledge of my own instincts. His name is Oliver, I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. Oliver Andrew, after my grandfather. Derek's expression shifted into something warm and approving. That's a great name, he said. Grace caught my eye from across the room. Just for a second. She didn't say a word. She simply looked at me with the eyes of a woman who had been in that room for the whole night and had seen everything I had seen, and then she looked back down at her chart. That look has stayed with me for 5 years. I never saw Grace again after we left the hospital. But sometimes, on the hardest nights of what came after the months of waiting, the file, the folder, all of it, I would think about her hand around mine, in the dark of that delivery room, and remind myself someone was there. Someone saw. Oliver made a small sound against my chest, the soft, indignant sound of a brand new person deciding he had opinions about the world already. Hey, I whispered to him, I see you too. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a door I wasn't ready to open yet sat quietly on its hinges, waiting. Oliver was 16 months old the first time I noticed the phone. Not the phone itself. Derek had always kept his close screen-down volume off. That wasn't new. What was new was the smile. It was a Tuesday evening in July of 2022. We'd been in the Buckhead apartment for almost a year by then. Derek had gotten a promotion, and suddenly we went from a 2-bedroom in Midtown to a place with quartz countertops and a balcony view and a parking garage with actual security. I was back teaching music full-time at Maplewood Elementary, a K-5 school about 20 minutes away. Oliver was at daycare 5 days a week. Life had a shape to it, and the shape felt almost normal. Almost. I was in the kitchen feeding Oliver pureed sweet potato, which he was wearing more than eating, decorated from chin to forehead in orange, when Derek's whole face went somewhere else. 15 seconds. That's all it was. He was at the kitchen island with a bourbon, and he looked down at his phone, and his expression went soft in a way I had not seen in months. Something private crossed his face, something warm and unguarded that he had absolutely not intended for anyone in that kitchen to witness. My hands went still on Oliver's spoon. Then Derek looked up and saw me watching him. The warmth vanished so fast it was like a door slamming shut in a windstorm. "Work thing," he said flatly, flipping the phone face down. He took a long sip of bourbon and didn't look at me again. "Must be a nice work thing," I said, keeping my voice light. "Stressful, actually. The Henderson deal is killing us." Oliver chose that moment to spit sweet potato directly onto my shirt, and Derek laughed genuine sudden, and just like that the moment dissolved into the ordinary chaos of a Tuesday night with a toddler. I wiped sweet potato off my collar, and I told myself, stress pressure, he just needed a second to himself, it's fine. But that smile. I kept coming back to that smile. The version of Derek who had looked at his phone in that kitchen. I hadn't seen that man in a long time. By November, Patricia Harmon had started coming around more. Patricia was Derek's mother, 59 years old, always in a blazer, always with a handbag that cost more than my car payment, and always arriving at our apartment on the days Derek was conveniently not home. She was the kind of woman who made dropping by feel like a formal inspection. She would sit at my kitchen table with a cup of tea she never finished, and talk about nothing in particular while her eyes moved around the apartment with the quiet, cataloging precision of someone taking inventory. One afternoon in late November, she set her teacup down and folded her hands on the table and looked at me with an expression of practiced maternal concern. "Derek mentioned you two have been having some tension," she said. My back stiffened so hard it hurt. "Derek said that he's carrying a tremendous amount of pressure right now, Claire." Patricia picked up her spoon and stirred her already cold tea. "The firm, the travel, all of it. A man needs to feel supported at home. You're a smart girl, I know you understand what I'm saying." My face went hot. "Patricia, if Derek has concerns about our marriage, I'd like to hear them from Derek." She smiled at me over her cup, patient, immovable, the smile of someone who has already decided the conversation is over. "Of course, sweetheart, of course." She left 40 minutes later, and I stood in the kitchen with Oliver on my hip, and my heart hammering, and the very clear sense that something was happening just outside my peripheral vision. Something with a shape I couldn't make out yet. The following month, a new hire joined the staff at Maplewood Elementary. Brett Lawson came in first week of December. He'd be teaching fifth grade social studies starting after the holiday break, and he introduced himself to the whole building with the easy warmth of someone who had never met a stranger in his life. By the end of his first week, he remembered every single person's coffee order, mine included. "No sugar, right?" he said, appearing at my music room door on a Monday morning with 2 cups from the place on Peachtree. "I figured you for a no-sugar person." "How'd you figure that?" I laughed, taking the cup. He grinned. "You've got a takes her coffee seriously energy. No fuss, no extras." He was funny. He was easy to talk to. He dropped by on Monday mornings and asked about my weekend, about Oliver, about whether Derek's deal had finally closed. It felt completely entirely normal, the kind of small daily kindness that makes a school feel like a community rather than just a building where you work. I thought nothing of it. For 6 months straight, every Monday morning, I handed Brett Lawson a complete update on my life without once questioning why he wanted it. The real fracture came in December, the kind you feel in your stomach before you can explain it. Derek had been working late, or so I was telling myself. I went down to the parking garage one evening to grab Oliver's stroller from the back of Derek's SUV. I opened the passenger door and reached across the center console. That's when I saw it. One single strand of hair, long pale gold, almost platinum, lying across the gray fabric of the passenger seat like it had been there for hours. My hand went completely cold. I stood in that fluorescent-lit garage for a long time, the strand between 2 fingers, the hum of the overhead lights buzzing in my ears. My brain started doing what it always did, building the explanation, filing the exit route, finding the reasonable interpretation. A coworker who needed a ride. A client. Someone who sat in the car for 30 seconds. "Okay," I said out loud to the empty garage to nobody. Then I put the strand down. I went upstairs. I made dinner. I gave Oliver his bath, and read him 2 books, and sang him the same song, the one that would show up again 5 years later, in a school auditorium, in a way I couldn't have predicted, and I tucked him in tight. I was so good at talking myself down. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until a night 2.5 years later, when everything finally cracked open, was that the afternoon I found that strand of hair, Brett Lawson had already sent Derek 4 text messages. One of them read, "She seemed off today. Asked me about the Savannah trip. I handled it. You should probably be more careful." There was a conversation I'd had with Brett that week. A casual hallway exchange where he'd mentioned Savannah, a weekend trip Derek and I had been loosely discussing. Nothing booked, nothing confirmed, something I hadn't told a single other person about. I'd felt a splinter of wrongness when he said it, and I'd smiled and kept walking and told myself it was nothing. It was not nothing. But I didn't know that yet. I was still in the part of the story where I was very, very good at not knowing things. January in Atlanta doesn't come in cold so much as it comes in gray. The sky goes the color of old concrete. The air carries the smell of rain that never quite decides to fall, and the whole city feels like it's holding its breath. Derek had left for Dallas that morning, rolling carry-on already at the door at 6:30 a.m. kiss on the cheek. 3 days client meetings, I'll call when I land. I stood in my bathrobe holding a coffee mug and watched him pull the door shut behind him, and I felt exactly nothing. Not sadness, not relief, just the particular emptiness of watching a stranger leave a house that used to feel like yours. Oliver was asleep. The apartment was quiet in the way it only gets after midnight, that specific total quiet that makes every small sound enormous. It was 11:47 p.m. when I went into Derek's home office looking for Oliver's iPad charger. The man owned 4 charges for his own devices, and somehow we could never find the one Oliver needed. I checked behind the monitor. My elbow caught the mouse. The screen woke up, and there it was. Not buried in a folder, not password protected. Just open the way you leave something open when you're in the middle of it and fully intend to come back. Harmon Dissolution Final Version 3. I stared at it. My first thought, and I'm still embarrassed by this, was that I had misread it. That it said something else. That dissolution meant something else in some context I wasn't understanding. I read it again, and my heart didn't sink so much as it stopped, the way a clock stops when someone reaches in and grabs the hands. I sat down in Derek's chair, My legs had simply stopped being reliable, and I read 47 pages. Prepared by a law firm in Buckhead with an address I didn't recognize dated all the way back to May of 2024, 8 months ago. 8 months. While I was making Oliver's school lunches and grading music worksheets and trying to figure out why the D string on the school's old violin kept going flat, Derek had been sitting across a mahogany desk somewhere quietly building a legal case against me. The strategy was laid out in 3 columns, clean and clinical, the way Derek organized everything in his life. Column 1, documentation of emotional instability. The file referenced audio files by date, 7 of them going back to March. I thought about every argument we'd had that year, every time I'd raised my voice, every time I'd cried, every frustrated thing I'd said in the kitchen after a long day that I hadn't fully meant. He had been recording me, his phone in his pocket or on the counter or on the nightstand recording. All of it. My hands started shaking so badly I had to press them flat against the desk. Column 2, psychological evaluation. A Dr. Marcus Webb described as a highly regarded family therapist with strong courtroom experience. The notes indicated Derek's legal team had already been in contact with Dr. Webb's office to coordinate the evaluation timeline. In plain English, they had already arranged what the evaluation would find before it was ever conducted. Not an assessment, a setup. Column 3, social isolation. A list of action items, several already checked off. Limit Claire's contact with Jess Moore. Encourage distance from Linda and Ray. Position primary support network as unstable influence. I read that line 3 times. He had been deliberately, methodically cutting me off from every person who might help me and framing it as concern, as care, as him just wanting what was best for our family. The sound that came out of me was small and involuntary. Not a cry, not quite something that lived underneath, crying something rawer than that. Then I found the email. It was at the back of the file, printed and paper-clipped, dated November 8th, 2024. The name at the top hit me like a fist directly to the sternum. Brittany Caldwell. The PI has 3 months of material she had written. Should be more than enough. I want this wrapped up before Oliver starts first grade. The spring play in June is perfect timing. Oliver has a part, she'll be there. Make sure she's visible. I read that last sentence 4 times. My vision blurred at the edges. The spring play, June, Oliver's show. This wasn't a divorce filing. This was a production. A fully staged, carefully cast production, and I had been assigned a role without my knowledge, without my consent, without ever being told the curtain was going up. I stood up. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else entirely, but I made them work. I took out my phone. 47 pages, 47 photographs, the flash going off like a tiny heartbeat in the quiet of Derek's neat, organized, treacherous office. I checked every photo for legibility. I photographed the email twice. Then I closed the laptop, set it back at the exact angle it had been, the way you return something to a shelf, and pray with everything you have that no one notices it was ever touched. I walked to the kitchen, filled the kettle, set it on the burner, and watched the coil turn orange while my hands trembled around the handle. He's been planning this for 8 months, my brain kept saying very calmly as if volume would make it land. 8 months. While you were here, the kettle boiled. I poured the water. Then I picked up my phone and called the only person I called when the ground disappeared under me. It rang twice. Claire. Jess's voice was thick with sleep. It's almost midnight. I need you to find me a lawyer, I said. My voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. Not tomorrow. Tonight, if you can reach anyone. Family law. The best in Atlanta. A beat. I heard the rustling of her sitting up fast. Okay, she said, and just like that her voice had sharpened into the version of Jess that showed up in emergencies, focused, no nonsense, already moving. Okay, I'm on it. Are you all right? And Jess. I stopped, looked out the kitchen window at the Atlanta skyline blurring slightly in the cold January dark. Don't say anything to Brett Lawson, not a single word about any of this. A pause. Why specifically Brett? My throat tightened. Because I think he's been reporting back to Derek, I said. Everything I do, everywhere I go. I think it's been going on for a long time. The silence on Jess's end lasted exactly 2 seconds before she said with a quiet fury that I felt through the phone like heat. "I'll find you the best damn lawyer in this city. Give me until morning." I held the phone against my chest after we hung up and breathed in 4 counts. Out 4 counts the way I taught my students before a performance when their nerves were eating them alive. Oliver was asleep down the hall. His arms would be flung wide the way they always were by midnight, like he was trying to hold the whole room. I was going to be okay. I had to be okay. Because the spring play was in June, and there were 5 months between tonight and that auditorium, and I intended to use every single one of them. The Sunday after I found the file, Jess drove over to my parents' house in Decatur to pick me up. I'd taken Oliver there Friday night because I needed to not be alone in that Buckhead apartment, and because my mother had taken one look at my face when I walked through her door and immediately started making the kind of food that means I don't know what happened, but I'm going to feed it until it gets smaller. Jess arrived at 10 a.m. with 2 coffees and an expression I recognized, the same one she'd worn the night junior year when she showed up at my dorm with a box of tissues and told me straight, "He's not worth it. Here's what we're going to do." 20 years of friendship and that face meant exactly one thing: I have information, and you need to hear it before we go any further. She waited until we were in her car, a silver Subaru she'd had since grad school, that smelled like pine air freshener and old textbooks, before she pulled out her phone. "Before you walk into Kate Sullivan's office tomorrow morning," she said, "you need to know who Brittany Caldwell actually is. Not who Derek told you she was, not the version she built for him, who she actually is." She turned the screen toward me. "Start from September." Brittany Caldwell's Instagram was clean, bright, and expensive looking in the way that only comes from significant effort carefully disguised as effortlessness. 120,000 followers, bio-intentional living, mindful love, building something real. The most recent post was a flat lay of herbal tea and a linen napkin, and a book whose title was something about emotional boundaries. I scrolled. The first post with Oliver hit me so hard I actually flinched, a full-body jolt like touching a live wire. It was a photo taken in Derek's apartment. I recognized the kitchen island immediately, the gray quartz countertop that I had stood in a showroom and pointed to and said, "That one." Oliver was in the background, soft-focused crayons in front of him, face turned just far enough away that you couldn't make out his features. Brittany was in the foreground, hair perfect expression, serene hands, cupped around a mug of tea. The caption read, "He doesn't say much, but I see him. Building something real one Sunday at a time." That brand paid her $800 for that post, Jess said, her voice gone very flat. The tea company, $800? My son. Blurred into the background of a stranger's lifestyle content like a soft focus prop. $800 deposited into Brittany Caldwell's account. How many? My voice came out barely above a whisper. 54 posts over 8 months. The air left my body completely. "Keep scrolling," Jess said quietly. A post about Sunday morning pancakes. Oliver's small handprint visible on the side of an apron used as a background detail for a kitchenware brand. $1,200. A post about blending families with intention featuring a designer diaper bag, the kind that costs $280 and calls itself a parenting investment, with Oliver's sneakers visible on the entryway floor mat beside it. $900. And then the post that made my throat close so completely I had to put the phone down. "Blending families isn't easy when boundaries aren't respected." Brittany had written beneath a photo of herself looking pensive by a rain-streaked window. "But we keep showing up for the ones who need us. Not everyone who enters a child's life deserves to stay. Sometimes love means holding the line anyway." 23,000 likes. 40-something comments calling the biomom toxic, unstable, difficult. 40 strangers who had never heard my name tearing me apart in a comment section because Brittany Caldwell had handed them a story and they had believed it completely. "She's talking about me," I said. My voice cracked on the last word. "Every single person in those comments thinks so," Jess said, and she wasn't even trying to keep the fury out of her voice anymore. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel like she was trying to break it. "Claire, she built an entire public narrative, 120,000 people wide. She spent 8 months telling the story of their family, yours and Oliver's and Derek's, as if you were already gone. as if you were already the problem that had been removed. Something cold and heavy settled in the bottom of my stomach. "She made money off my son," I said. "Yes." Jess's voice cracked slightly on the word, which told me she'd been holding that specific piece in since she found it. She did. And here's why that matters legally in Georgia. Both legal parents have to consent before a minor child's image can be used in paid commercial content. Brand deals, sponsored posts, anything with a financial exchange attached. Derek can't consent on your behalf. He never had the right to. Every single one of those 54 posts that generated revenue is a violation of your parental rights. I pushed the car door open and stood in Jess's driveway in the January air because I needed to move or I was going to fall apart right there in the passenger seat. And I had not come this far to fall apart in a Subaru on a Sunday morning. The Atlanta skyline was faint and gray in the distance. My eyes burned so badly I had to press the back of my hand against them hard and breathe through my nose until the worst of it passed. Jess came around and stood beside me. She didn't reach for me. She didn't try to fix it with words. She just stood there, shoulder almost touching mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her and let me feel the full weight of it without rushing me past it. After a long moment, I said, "Send everything to Kate Sullivan tonight. All of it." "Already done," Jess said. She acknowledged receipt at 11 p.m. on Friday. I nodded. Something was happening beneath the grief. Something that had been liquid and shapeless all weekend and was now slowly hardening into something with edges. Something I recognized. "My dad paid the retainer," Jess added. "Don't argue with me." A sound came out of me that surprised us both. Something close to a laugh, sudden and involuntary. "Jess," he said, and I am quoting the man directly, that no daughter of his was walking into a courtroom without the sharpest lawyer in Atlanta, and that Kate Sullivan had 17 verdicts framed on her office wall, and that was good enough for him. She paused. He also said some other things about Derek that I'm choosing to leave out for the sake of keeping this Sunday civil. This time it was a real laugh, small and broken around the edges, but real. My eyes went hot and blurry again, and I let them just for a moment, just for those few seconds in Jess's driveway, with the cold January air on my face and my best friend beside me. "Tomorrow morning," I said, getting it back together. 10 o'clock. "I'll drive you," Jess said. She said it simply, the way she said everything that mattered, without ceremony, without asking if I wanted her to, because in 20 years she had never once waited to be asked. Tomorrow, Kate Sullivan's office on Peachtree Street. 17 verdicts on the wall, and a woman who had been winning cases like mine for 18 years. Faheen. Tonight I went back inside my parents' house, sat at the kitchen table my mother had set for dinner, watched Oliver stack crackers into a tower and knock them over and laugh like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened, and I held every single piece of what I knew in the back of my chest like a held breath. 5 months until June. 5 months until the spring play. I was going to be ready. Catherine Sullivan's office on Peachtree Street smelled like strong coffee, old case files, and the particular kind of authority that only comes from 18 years of winning. Not diplomas on the walls, verdicts. Framed court decisions, every one of them dates and case numbers printed clean beneath each citation. The kind of office that doesn't need to announce itself, it simply shows you the record and lets you draw your own conclusions. Kate was 45, dark hair pulled back without fuss, reading glasses pushed up on her head like she'd forgotten they were there. She was already standing when Jess and I walked in, hand-extended, eyes moving over me with the quick, assessing focus of someone who had been reading people across a desk for the better part of 2 decades. "Sit down," she said, not unkindly, just direct the way people are direct when they don't believe in wasting time on the approach. I read everything Jess sent, all 67 pages. I sat. Jess took the chair beside me and crossed her arms like she was personally prepared to go to war on my behalf, which, knowing Jess, she absolutely was. Kate took her glasses off her head, set them on the desk, and looked at me the way someone looks at a problem they've already started solving. "Before we talk strategy, how long have you been carrying all of this alone?" My throat tightened without warning. "About 3 years," I said. "Give or take." "Not anymore," Kate said. She opened her notepad. "Here's what we are up against." Kate said, her pen cutting through the paper. "Your husband isn't just looking for a divorce. He is running a smear campaign designed to strip your parental rights entirely. He wants to weaponize your natural reactions against you, Use a compromised therapist to declare you unfit and cut off your oxygen by isolating you from Jess and your parents. It's a textbook trap to manufacture an unstable mother on paper. But he made one fatal mistake. He assumed you would never see it coming. Our job starts today, and we are going to dismantle his little production piece by piece. I leaned forward slightly. What's first? The Instagram. Kate's pen tapped the notepad once. Today I'm sending a cease and desist to Brittany Caldwell for the commercial use of Oliver's image without your consent. Under Georgia law, both legal parents must authorize a minor child's appearance in paid content brand deals, sponsored posts, anything with money attached. Derek had no right to consent on your behalf, and every single one of those 54 posts that generated revenue is a violation of your parental rights. She'll delete them. And if she doesn't, I asked, then we file in court. Kate said it the way someone says 2 plus 2 equals 4, simple, settled, already decided. But she will. She knows exactly what she did. Brittany deleted every post within 4 hours of receiving Kate's letter. By that evening, Brittany's feed had vanished, replaced by a single cryptic text post about protecting her peace and holding boundaries against toxic people. It was the exact same narrative she had used to target me for months, only this time the internet wasn't buying her victim act anymore. The mask had been ripped off, and no amount of curated captions could save her brand now. Jess sent me the screenshot at 9 p.m. I forwarded it directly to Kate. Kate's reply came back in under 2 minutes. Perfect. That goes in the folder. 3 weeks later, Miss Walsh stopped me at Maplewood's front gate. Amanda Walsh had been Oliver's kindergarten teacher since September, early 30s. Warm-faced, the kind of teacher who remembered which kids needed 5 extra minutes to settle in the morning and which ones needed a job to feel useful. Oliver came home talking about her almost every day. She'd been paying attention to my son in the way that changed children. I trusted her completely. She was waiting for me at 3:15 with a small spiral notebook held against her chest. Mrs. Harmon, she said carefully, do you have a few minutes before you go in? Of course. My heart had already kicked up speed. Ms. Walsh opened the notebook. Her handwriting was small and precise, every entry dated in the left margin. I want to make sure you're getting this information directly from me accurately. She turned to a page near the middle. Oliver was picked up 30 minutes early last Thursday at 2:45 instead of 3:15 by his father and a woman I did not have on your authorized pickup list. The air left my lungs in one hard pull. Maplewood's policy requires both parents to sign off before any new person is added to a child's authorized pickup list. Ms. Walsh continued, her voice steady, but her eyes watching me with the careful attentiveness of someone who understood exactly what she was describing. Unless there is a court order specifying otherwise, and there isn't one on file for Oliver. Mr. Harmon added this person's name the morning of the pickup. You were not notified. She pointed to the entry. I noted the discrepancy here, and here, and here. 3 entries, 3 separate dates, each one marked in her neat handwriting, primary parent not informed. She's been picking him up, I said. My voice came out remarkably steady for a woman whose hands had gone ice cold inside her coat pockets. 3 times. 3 times that I have documented, yes, Ms. Walsh said. She closed the notebook and held it flat against her chest. Then she looked at me directly. Mrs. Harmon, I keep this notebook at home, not in my classroom, not in the school system. I understood immediately what she wasn't saying out loud, that she had made a deliberate choice about where that evidence lived and who had access to it. Thank you, I said. 2 words had never carried so much weight in my life. I called Kate from the parking lot before I even reached my car. She picked up on the second ring. When I finished telling her everything, the dates, the notebook, the unauthorized pickups, she was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Claire, she said, this is what we've been waiting for. The pickup violations give us grounds to file for an emergency hearing on interference with parental rights. Under Georgia law, OCGA, Section 19-9-3, when one parent takes repeated actions that materially interfere with the other parent's legal rights, without court authorization, we can request emergency relief from the court. Derek just handed us our first real move. File it, I said. Already drafting, Kate said. Kate had warned me twice. 2 separate meetings, same measured voice she used when she needed something to actually stick. Derek needs one clean moment on tape where you sound like someone a judge shouldn't trust with a child, she'd said the second time, leaning forward with her reading glasses in her hand. Loud crying, out of control, he needs any of those 3. Don't give it to him. Not for 30 seconds. Not once. I had been repeating that warning like a hymn for 7 weeks straight. In the car, in the shower, in the dark after Oliver went to sleep and the apartment got quiet enough to think. What I hadn't planned for was the Wednesday night in March when Derek came home early. He never came home early. In 3 years of marriage, I could count on one hand the number of times Derek Harmon had walked through that door before 7 p.m., and every single time it had come with an elaborate runway of apologies and explanations. That evening, he walked in at 6:45, carrying takeout from the Thai place on Peachtree, my order the exact dish I hadn't touched in months because it tasted like the early years when I still believed the version of him I'd been given. He was wearing an expression I had never seen on his face before. Warm, soft, completely entirely rehearsed. "Figured you hadn't eaten," he said, setting the bag on the counter with the ease of a man who lived here and meant it. "How's Oliver?" "He went down early," I said, keeping my voice level. "Fever broke this afternoon." "Good." Derek opened the cabinet and took out 2 plates. Like this happened every night, like this was just Tuesday. I've been thinking about him a lot, about both of you, honestly. Every nerve in my body snapped to attention. I sat down at the kitchen island and pressed both palms flat against the quartz counter. His counter, the one I had picked out, and I watched him move through my kitchen with the comfortable ease of a man who believed he had full control of every surface in the room. His left hand drifted to his chest pocket once. Just briefly. Just enough. "His phone!" Kate's voice in the back of my skull. "One clean moment. That's all he needs." "I've been talking to someone," Derek said, setting a plate in front of me and sitting down across the island with his elbows resting on the counter open, earnest, the picture of a husband trying. "A therapist. His name is Dr. Marcus Webb. He specializes in family dynamics, very well regarded in Atlanta. I think it would really help if we both did separate evaluations, for Oliver's sake." The name landed in my chest like a stone dropped from a great height. Dr. Marcus Webb. The name from the file. Column 2. Coordinate the evaluation timeline. Not an independent assessment, a predetermined conclusion, dressed up in professional credentials, a witness stand, disguised as a therapy office. My jaw locked. My eyes burned with everything I wanted to say. The fury came up so fast and so hot that I had to grip the edge of the counter to keep myself from showing a single degree of it on my face. "I'll think about it," I said, each word placed with surgical precision like diffusing something. "I just feel like—" Derek leaned in closer, voice dropping to something that sounded almost gentle. "Oliver told Brittany that you've been crying in front of him. More than once, Claire." The heat behind my eyes went white, because Oliver had never said that. Oliver had never been alone with Brittany long enough to have a conversation that specific, that damaging, that conveniently usable. This was a fabrication delivered with the careful, practiced face of a concerned father, and the phone in his chest pocket was recording every single second of my reaction. The file. 47 pages. Column 1 documentation of emotional instability. 7 audio files already. He had come home with my favorite food and the name of a fake therapist and a lie about my son's mouth, and he was sitting across from me in my own kitchen waiting for me to break. My hands were shaking under the counter where he couldn't see them. My throat was burning with 6 months of everything I had not been allowed to say. The words were right there clawing at the inside of my chest. True things deserved things, every single thing he had earned from me in 3 years of lies. I breathed in, 4 counts. Out, 4 counts. The way I taught my 3rd graders before their first recital when their little faces went pale with terror. "I appreciate you sharing that concern," I said. My voice came out so steady it almost scared me. "I'll keep Dr. Webb's name in mind." Something shifted behind Derek's eyes, quick, almost imperceptible, gone before it fully formed. Almost disappointment. Almost. "I just want what's best for him," Derek said. "So do I said. He nodded. He started eating. He talked about something at work, something about Oliver's upcoming show at school, and I sat across from him and answered in single sentences and counted every breath I took because if I stopped counting, I was going to say every word that was tearing itself apart inside my chest. After dinner, Derek went upstairs. I stepped out onto the back balcony and closed the door behind me. March in Atlanta can't make up its mind. That night, it was cold enough to sting, the kind of cold that finds the gap between your collar and your jaw. I stood at the railing and gripped the metal with both hands and let myself feel it, all of it. The rage and the grief and the bone-deep exhaustion of performing calm for a man who had spent 8 months building a case against me while I packed Oliver's school lunches and taught children how to find middle C. My whole body was shaking, not a little, the full, uncontrolled trembling of someone who has been holding something enormous and finally sets it down for 30 seconds. "Don't you dare," I whispered to no one, pressing my forehead against the cold metal railing. "Not tonight, not here." My phone buzzed against my palm. A text from Tom just flagged something massive. Derek opened a personal loan for $95,000 using your joint marital assets as collateral, and within 72 hours, the entire amount was funneled directly into Brittany's shell company. Claire, he used your name to finance his mistress's life. Call me right now. I read it twice. $95,000. Marital assets, money that legally belonged to both of us under Georgia law, quietly funneled into a shell company with Brittany Caldwell's name on it, and no real business activity to justify a single cent of it. Hiding marital assets during divorce proceedings is fraud under Georgia law. It doesn't matter how carefully you hide it. Forensic accountants exist precisely because people like Derek believe they're smarter than the paper trail. I called Kate. She picked up on the first ring. "Derek just tried to bait me into a recorded argument," I said. "He used Dr. Webb's name. He claimed Oliver told Brittany I've been crying in front of him." "Did you react?" Kate asked immediately. "No." "Good." Her voice was bedrock. "Don't engage with Webb's name again under any circumstances. And the 95,000, I just saw Jess's message. Claire marital asset concealment combined with everything else we have changes the entire financial picture of this case. Derek's team built their entire strategy on the assumption you had no resources and no information." A pause. "They were wrong on both counts." I hung up and stood on that balcony until the shaking in my hands went still. Then I went inside, checked on Oliver, out cold arms, flung wide, one sock on and one off the way he slept when he felt completely safe in the world, and I stood in his doorway for a long time with my hand on the frame. Whatever Derek thought he'd recorded in his chest pocket tonight, it wasn't what he'd come for. And somewhere under the grief and the fury and the exhaustion, I felt it again, that cold, quiet thing that had been solidifying in my chest since the night I found the file. It knew exactly where it was going. Before I reveal what the forensic accountant found hidden inside 3 years of paperwork, comment the number 9 right now, so I know you're still here with me. Because what comes next changed absolutely everything. And one thing before we continue the story ahead contains some fictional elements crafted for storytelling purposes. It may not reflect every detail of any single experience. If that's not for you, no pressure at all, you can stop here. But if you're staying, let's go. I had known Brett Lawson for 6 months, 6 months of Monday morning coffee. No sugar, always the right temperature. Always with that easy grin that said, "I'm just a friendly guy who remembers things." 6 months of casual conversation about weekends and Oliver's latest funny thing and whether Derek's deal had finally closed. 6 months of me handing a complete stranger a running summary of my own life without once asking myself why he wanted it. Jess's text had come in at 7 a.m. on a Monday in late March, 2 days after Derek had sat across my kitchen island with a recording in his chest pocket and a lie about my son on his lips. The screenshot filled my screen. Brett's number at the top. Derek's name below it. The message dated 6 weeks earlier. "She seemed off today. Asked me about the Savannah trip. I handled it. You should be more careful." Derek's reply, "Good. Keep me posted on her schedule this week." I read it 3 times standing at my kitchen counter. My coffee went cold. Oliver was still asleep down the hall, and the apartment had that particular pre-dawn quiet, and I felt something move through me that wasn't quite rage and wasn't quite grief. It was the cold, clarifying sensation of a puzzle piece dropping into place after months of staring at the wrong corner of the board. Brett hadn't been friendly. Brett had been a job. I drove to Maplewood early, let myself into the music room, turned on the lights, set the chairs exactly where they always were. Then I sat down behind my desk, placed my phone face up on the surface where he would see it the moment he walked in, and I waited. Brett came through the door at 8:05 with 2 cups from the place on Peachtree, same as every Monday, same easy smile already forming before he'd fully cleared the doorway. "Hey," he said brightly. "How was your—" He stopped. His eyes had found my phone. His own message stared back at him from the screen. She seemed off today, in his own words, with his own timestamp in a screenshot that made absolutely clear someone had seen every single word. The smile dissolved off his face so completely and so fast it was almost clinical to watch. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands tightened around both coffee cups until I could see the pressure traveling all the way up his forearms. "Claire," he started. "Leave my classroom, Brett." My voice came out low and quiet and so utterly steady that it surprised even me. "Right now." His mouth opened. A sound came out that was the shape of an explanation that hadn't formed yet, something between "I can explain" and "please let me." And his eyes were doing that desperate scanning thing people's eyes do when they're looking for an exit that isn't there. "Please," he said, "just let me leave." Brett set both cups down on the edge of the nearest desk. His hands were shaking visibly now, not a little the full exposed trembling of a man who has just understood the size of the thing he is standing inside. He walked to the door. He stopped with one hand on the frame, his back to me, like he couldn't bring himself to leave without trying one more time. "I thought he was protecting Oliver," Brett said to the wall. His voice had gone rough, scraped down to something raw underneath. "He told me the home environment wasn't safe, that you were struggling, that Oliver needed someone looking out for him." He exhaled a sharp, broken sound. I told myself I was helping. My jaw ached from how hard I was holding it. Every word Brett had just said landed exactly where Derek had aimed it, the same story, the same framing, the same carefully constructed version of me that lived in the file on that laptop screen. Unstable, struggling, a risk. "You were helping yourself feel like a good person," I said. "Those are two very different things." Brett flinched like I'd struck him. Then he walked out. The door swung shut behind him. I picked up my phone and called Kate before the sound of his footsteps had faded from the hallway. "It's done," I said. "He knows I have the messages." "Good." Kate's voice was immediate and focused. "Don't file an HR complaint yet. Let the school handle the employment side on its own timeline. But Brett, knowing we have documentation changes everything for him. He's going to have to decide very soon which side of this he wants to be standing on." A pause. "He may come to us before we go to him." She was right, but that was still weeks away. What came first was the call from Tom Brewer, the forensic accountant Jess had brought in to trace Derek's financial movements. A forensic accountant is exactly what it sounds like. A specialist who follows money the way a detective follows evidence through shell companies and transferred assets and accounts that were never meant to be found. Tom had been working quietly for 3 weeks. "Ms. Harmon," he said when I picked up, "I have the full picture on the LLC, but I also found something else." His voice had the careful neutrality of someone delivering information they know will land hard. "3 documents bearing your signature, a loan authorization, a vehicle title transfer, and an investment account amendment." He paused. "I've compared them against your known signature samples. Miss Harmon, you didn't sign any of them." The floor tilted under me. "Say that again," I said. "You didn't sign them," Tom repeated. "Someone did, but it wasn't you." I called Kate the moment I hung up. She picked up on the first ring, listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said 4 words in a voice that had gone very quiet and very precise. "Claire, that is felony forgery." April came and went. Then May, the way Atlanta spring always arrives suddenly and completely, dogwoods exploding white and pink along every street. Overnight, the air going warm enough to open windows and keep them open. The hearing was scheduled for August. The forgery investigation was building quietly in the background, the way a storm builds before anyone thinks to look up at the sky. And then it was June. Standing under that exit sign, Brittany's live stream blinking red from the front row, 4,200 people watching a room that had no idea it was being performed for. I had been holding 5 months of everything in my chest like a closed fist. From somewhere backstage came the low murmur of 22 kindergartners lining themselves up into something approximating a straight line. I could picture Oliver back there shifting his weight from foot to foot the way he did when his nerves were getting the better of him, checking his costume for the 4th time, trying to remember to stand still. Mr. Dawson Maplewood's principal, a steady-voiced man in his mid-50s who had run this school for 11 years, stepped up to the microphone at the edge of the stage to welcome everyone. The auditorium settled into that particular electric hush of parents who are trying very hard to be patient and failing beautifully. Then the side door opened and 22 small people came in. The whole room broke open. Not polite applause. The real thing, the involuntary collective exhale of 150 adults who had been holding their breath and suddenly remembered that this was supposed to be joyful. Kids in their costumes, some grinning with the total abandon of children who don't know yet what stage fright feels like, some wide-eyed and fixed on the middle-distance running lines in their heads. I found Oliver in 3 seconds. Third from the left. The small clip on his costume had gone slightly crooked and his hands were clasped in front of him the way Ms. Walsh had clearly drilled the class. But his fingers were moving against each other in that small private way he had when he was working through something inside himself. My boy, 5 years old and trying so hard to be composed. The class took their places on the risers. The scene began, the assigned parts, each child stepping forward in turn. A little girl in the front delivered her line at a volume that sent a ripple of laughter through the audience. A boy near the back forgot his words halfway through, stared at Ms. Walsh with eyes the size of dinner plates, then remembered and finished with the triumphant expression of someone who had just survived a natural disaster. When Oliver stepped forward for his lines, his voice came out smaller than I knew it to be, that particular thinness that happens when a child is trying hard and the nerves are still winning. But he got through every single word. I had Jess's camera pressed to my eye and my finger on the shutter, and I was not breathing. Then he stepped back into line, and he looked out at the audience. His eyes went straight to the front row, to the chair where his card had been, where Brittany Caldwell was sitting with her phone raised and her live stream running, 4,200 strangers watching her be present for a moment she had engineered and stolen and dressed up in the language of love. Oliver's face did something complicated and still. Then his eyes started moving. Row by row, face by face, with the quiet, methodical determination of a 5-year-old who knows exactly what he is looking for and will not stop until he finds it. Row 1, row 2, row 3, further back, further, until he reached the wall, until he found the green exit sign and the woman standing underneath it in a navy dress with a borrowed camera and 5 months of everything she hadn't been allowed to say pressed behind her sternum. His whole face changed. Not the way a face changes when something goes wrong, the crumpling, the confusion. The way it changes when something that has been searching finds what it was looking for. The nervousness in his fingers went still. His shoulders dropped a fraction. He looked at me with the expression of a child who has just made a decision. Then he looked back at the stage and stood straight. The scene ended. The audience applauded. Ms. Walsh stepped to the center microphone and the piano track began. "You Are My Sunshine." It hit me somewhere below the ribs, in the place where that song had always lived. The same melody I used to hum over Oliver's crib at 2 a.m. in the dark of our old Midtown apartment. The same song he'd asked about in the car this morning, with that careful, deliberate question. "What's your favorite song that we sing together?" He had known this morning, and he had been carrying it the whole drive here. 22 small voices filled that auditorium, not perfectly pitched because they were 5, and pitch is a work in progress at 5, but fully, completely without a single held-back note. I pressed my free hand over my mouth. I kept the camera steady with the other one by sheer force of will. In the front row, Brittany held her phone toward the stage. The red light blinked on. When the song ended and the room erupted, Ms. Walsh raised one hand gently for quiet. "Before we close," she said into the microphone, "I've asked each of our students to share one thing they want to carry with them." One by one, the children stepped up. A girl with 2 tight braids said she wanted to remember how to do a cartwheel. A boy said he wanted to remember the day he read a whole book by himself. each one a small perfect truth. Oliver, Ms. Walsh said. Oliver stepped to the microphone. It came to just below his chin. He looked out at 150 faces, and then his eyes traveled all the way to the back wall, to the exit sign, to me. He held that look for a moment that felt both instantaneous and endless. Then he turned back to the microphone, and his voice came out clear and unhurried, and absolutely certain. I want to be brave like my mommy. The room went breathless. That lady. Oliver's gaze moved to the front row, direct and uncomplicated. The frank honesty of a child who has not yet learned to soften truth for anyone's comfort. Told my mommy to stand in the back. The sound that moved through that auditorium was audible. 50 people shifted at once. Someone in the third row made a noise that was not quite a gasp. Brittany's smile was still on her face, but it had stopped being a smile. It was just the shape her muscles were holding while everything underneath it went cold and still. But my mommy is not a nanny. Oliver paused, and in that pause, every single person in the room leaned forward without moving. His voice dropped to something softer, something that was somehow still perfectly clear in every corner of that space. My mommy is my mommy. Then he reached into the small pocket of his costume and pulled out a folded piece of paper red crayon, visible even from the back of the room, a heart tilting slightly to the left. He held it up toward the exit sign, toward me, and his voice went gentle the way 5-year-olds' voices go when they are saying something they mean with everything they have. I found your card, Mommy. Can you come up here? You're supposed to be in the front. 150 people turned around. At the back of the room, under the green exit sign, Eleanor Haynes leaned quietly toward the young man at the AV console and said something brief. He looked at his tablet. He looked at the projection screen. He nodded. The screen behind the stage flickered. Then it showed something new, clear, well-lit shot from the second row at eye level. 2 hands lifting a folded piece of paper from a chair, holding it 1 second, folding it, dropping it into a bag. And then in audio that the room's acoustics carried with perfect, devastating clarity. Stand in the back, honey. You'll look less like the nanny that way. Brittany Caldwell stared at herself on that screen. The color left her face in a way that had nothing to do with the lighting. Her mouth opened slightly. Her phone hand dropped 3 inches without her noticing. The red live stream light kept blinking. 4,200 people watching, hundreds of them already recording their own screens, the moment already beyond anything she could contain or control or delete. From the third row, Jess was already beside me, appearing from somewhere in the rows, like she always appeared when I needed her, without being summoned, without waiting to be asked. She said one word, quiet and absolute. Go. The word landed in my chest like a starting gun. Go. I moved. Not fast, not running, each step deliberate, and even the walk of a woman who has spent 5 months deciding where she belongs and is done being told otherwise. The navy dress. Jess's camera still in my right hand. Every person in that auditorium had turned around, and I walked through their attention like it was weather present, undeniable, and entirely beside the point. From the front row, Brittany's head snapped toward me. Her mouth opened slightly. The red live stream light on her phone kept blinking. 4,200 people, watching, hundreds already recording their own screens. She reached for her bag with her free hand. A young staff member in a blue polo stepped into the side aisle. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, solid as a wall, and Brittany looked at him and understood. You need to move, she said, her voice low and sharp, all the warmth stripped out of it entirely. Ma'am, the young man said pleasantly, Mr. Dawson asked me to make sure everyone stays for the remainder of the program. Brittany's jaw tightened. She looked back at her phone screen. The comment section was a blur of movement. She couldn't read it fast enough to know how bad it was, but she didn't need to read it. She could feel it. She was trapped inside her own broadcast. Every one of the 4,000 people watching had seen everything. Turning it off now would only be the final confirmation. So the red light kept blinking. She handed them every single second herself, I thought, walking past her row without slowing down. Thank you for that. Derek had not moved from his chair. He sat perfectly still with the show program folded in his lap, watching me walk toward the stage, with the expression of a man running emergency calculations on a situation that had stopped adding up. That face, The measuring, managing face I had first seen at 6:13 in the morning over the head of our newborn son was finally out in the open where everyone could see it. Mr. Dawson stepped to the side microphone. I want to note for the record that live streaming of minors on Maplewood property requires written consent from all legal guardians present per our enrollment agreement. The individual currently live streaming will need to end that broadcast and meet with administration after the program. He still didn't look at Brittany. He didn't have to. I reached the stage. Oliver came off the riser in one single step and launched himself at me. No hesitation, no waiting, just the full-speed certainty of a child who never once doubted his mother would be there. I went down to my knees on that stage floor and caught him with everything I had, both arms around his small back, face pressed into his hair, and 5 months of everything I had been holding cracked open all at once. My whole body shook. I didn't try to stop it. "Baby," I managed, voice breaking completely open. "You did so good. You did so good." Oliver pulled back just enough to look at my face. His small hand reached up and touched my cheek where it was wet, gentle, and matter-of-fact. "Mommy, why are you crying? I said it was a happy day." A laugh tore out of me through the tears. I know you did. "Are these happy tears?" he asked, studying my face with the focused scientific curiosity of a 5-year-old conducting an investigation. "The happiest," I said. "The absolute happiest tears that have ever existed." He seemed to accept this as a reasonable answer. "Okay," he said. Then he held up the folded card, the red crayon heart, the lopsided letters. "I found it on the floor near her bag. It fell out, I think. Or she dropped it." He pressed it into my hand, very serious. "It's yours, Mommy. It has your name." My fingers closed around it so tight my knuckles went white. "Thank you, baby," I whispered. "Thank you." "Ms. Walsh said telling the truth is the bravest thing," Oliver said like he was reciting something important he'd memorized. "She said brave people don't have to be loud. They just have to be true." He tilted his head at me. "Were you scared at the back?" I looked at my son's face, 5 years old, earnest, completely unaware of the 4,000 people watching him exist in real time, and I said, "Yes, baby. I was a little scared." "Me too," he admitted. "My tummy felt funny when I went to the microphone, but then I saw you and it went away." That cracked me open all over again. I pulled him back in, held him against my chest, pressed my lips to the top of his head. "You are the bravest person I know," I told him. "Do you know that?" "Braver than you?" he asked, muffled against my shoulder. "We can share it," I said. He thought about this seriously for approximately 2 seconds. "Okay, equal brave." "Equal brave," I agreed. Ray and Linda were waiting in the hallway when we came out. My father broad-shouldered and steady, my mother with her good blue cardigan and eyes that had been crying for a while and weren't apologizing for it. Linda reached me first, both hands cupping my face. "Oh, baby," she said, voice thick. "Oh, sweetheart." "Mom," my throat closed. "Don't you dare apologize for any of this," Linda said fiercely, thumbs brushing my cheeks. "Don't you dare." Ray didn't say anything at all. He just opened his arms and I walked into them, and he pulled both me and Oliver in at the same time, one broad hand on each of our backs, and held on. "Dad," I said, my voice muffled against his shoulder. "I know," he said. "I got you, both of you." Ray made too much garlic bread. He always made too much garlic bread. It was the language he spoke when words weren't enough. And that Friday evening in Decatur, 2 hours after his daughter had walked down the center aisle of a school auditorium, with the whole room standing, Ray Foster stood at his kitchen counter and sliced an entire baguette with the focused intensity of a man who needed to do something with his hands. Oliver sat at the kitchen table demolishing his second piece completely unbothered. "Grandpa?" Oliver said, examining his bread with the critical eye of a food inspector. "Did you put extra garlic this time?" "I always put extra," Ray said. "That's the whole point." "Good," Oliver said, and took an enormous bite. Linda sat across from him watching her grandson eat with the particular expression of a grandmother who is feeling approximately 17 emotions at once and has decided that watching a 5-year-old eat garlic bread is the safest place to put her eyes right now. She had cried twice since we got here. Both times she'd looked away quickly and said there was something in her eye. The second time, Oliver had looked up from his plate and said very helpfully, "Grandma, maybe you should wash your face." Linda had laughed so hard she'd knocked her napkin off the table. I was on the couch with my phone face down on the armrest and a cup of tea going cold in my hands when Jess came in from the back porch laptop, open eyes wide. "Okay," she said, dropping onto the cushion beside me. "Claire." "What?" 2 million views. I stared at her. "Which clip?" "All of them." Her voice cracked slightly on the second word. "There are 19 different clips circulating right now. The smallest one has 340,000. The one Eleanor Haynes posted the full footage with the audio has 900,000, and it's been up for 6 hours. The sound I made was not quite anything. I looked over at Oliver, who was now asking Ray if garlic bread could be a vegetable because it came from a plant, and Ray was saying he would look into it seriously. "He has no idea," I said softly. "None," Jess said. "Good. Let's keep it that way as long as we possibly can." She turned the laptop toward me. The comments were moving so fast they blurred. She pointed to one that had been screenshot and reshared more than any other. "This 5-year-old just said more in 30 seconds than most adults manage in a lifetime." She looked at me. "That one's been shared 40,000 times." My eyes burned. I looked away before it turned into something I couldn't stop. By Saturday morning, Jess was sitting at the kitchen table with her second coffee, and the look of someone who had not fully slept. 12 million, she said when I walked in. I sat down across from her. 12 million. Across platforms. And Claire, she turned the laptop around again. The brand emails to Brittany's management started Friday night. 9 p.m. the first one came in. What did it say? Jess read directly from the screen. "We are terminating this partnership effective immediately and will be issuing a public statement distancing our brand from recent events." That's from the tea company. She scrolled. "This one's from the bag brand. Given the circumstances that have come to light, we will not be renewing our contract." And this one, she paused. "This one is from the children's clothing company, the one that paid her $900 to use Oliver's sneakers." "What does that one say?" Jess looked up. "It says we are horrified by what we have learned and are donating the equivalent of all payments made under this contract to a child welfare organization of our choosing." The kitchen was quiet for a moment except for the coffee maker finishing its cycle. "Good," I said. Sunday morning, Jess appeared in the doorway of the guest room at 7:45 with her phone outstretched. "She's gone," Jess said. "Accounts deactivated. Everything's gone." I sat up. "When?" "Sometime in the last hour. I was checking and it just wasn't there anymore." Jess leaned against the doorframe. "I already sent the deactivation notification to Kate." "What did Kate say?" Jess held up her phone and read, "Already noted. We have full archives of all content. The deletion itself is now part of the record." She lowered the phone. She replied in 45 seconds, Claire, at 7:44 in the morning on a Sunday. "She's not human," I said. "She is absolutely not human," Jess agreed. "She is a legal force of nature, and I want to be her when I grow up." I laughed, a real one, sudden and surprised, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Kate called at 9:15 that evening. I was on the back porch of my parents' house, with a glass of sweet tea, watching the Atlanta skyline blink orange and white against the June sky. "I filed the emergency motion this afternoon," Kate said. "Judge Hargrove's clerk confirmed receipt. We have a hearing date." "How soon?" I asked. "Sooner than Derek expected," Kate said simply. "Claire, the footage, the pickup violations, the asset concealment, the forgery evidence, all of it together. This is the strongest emergency filing I have built in 18 years. After I hung up, I sat with Derek's voicemail still unanswered in my phone. 3 calls since Friday. The third one had left a message I had listened to exactly once and then forwarded directly to Kate without replying. What I'd heard in his voice had stopped me cold. Not anger, not calculation. Something smaller. Something I had never once heard from Derek Harmon in 3 years of marriage. It sounded almost like fear. I left it there, set my phone face down on the porch railing, and looked out at the city lights until Oliver appeared at the back door in his pajamas. "Mommy, Grandpa says dinner is ready and he made extra garlic bread again." "Of course he did," I said, standing up. "He says it's a vegetable now. He looked it up." "What did he find?" Oliver grinned so wide his whole face crinkled. "He says garlic is technically a vegetable, so the bread counts a little bit." I took my son's hand and walked back inside. And whatever was in Derek's voicemail, whatever new version of him was beginning to understand what he had actually built, stayed right there on the porch where I'd left it. Kate's call came at 7:45 Wednesday morning, the same time it always came when something had shifted. I was standing at the kitchen counter in the Buckhead apartment Oliver already dropped at my parents' house, coffee in hand, when her name appeared on my screen. "Someone just walked into my office without an appointment," Kate said. Her voice had a quality I hadn't heard before, not urgency, but the focused stillness of a hunter who has just seen movement in the trees. "You're going to want to come in." 30 minutes later, I was in Kate's waiting area when the conference room door opened. Brett Lawson walked out, and the man I saw bore almost no resemblance to the easy coffee-bearing colleague who had spent 6 months treating my life like a subscription newsletter he was collecting for someone else. He looked like he hadn't slept since Friday. His face had gone gray and tight, and he held himself with the rigid posture of a man bracing against something internal that was trying very hard to get out. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the elevator, pressed the button, and stared at the doors until they opened and swallowed him whole. Kate appeared in the conference room doorway. "Come in," she said. I sat across the desk from her. "Tell me everything." Kate opened her notepad. Brett came in at 7 a.m. He had a USB drive with 6 months of messages between himself and Derek, full threads, timestamps, everything. She set her pen down and looked at me directly. "And he brought something else. A text message Derek sent him Sunday night." My chest tightened. "What did it say?" Kate picked up her phone and read it aloud, her voice perfectly level. "This got out of hand. I need you to say you never sent me anything. Deny everything. I'll make it worth your while." The air left the room. "He asked Brett to lie," I said. "In an active legal case." "In an active legal proceeding," Kate confirmed. "Soliciting a witness to provide false testimony or to deny the existence of evidence while a case is pending constitutes obstruction of justice. It doesn't matter how he phrased it. I'll make it worth your while. Is Derek Harmon on record attempting to buy false testimony?" She paused. "That is a federal crime, Claire, on top of everything else." My hands were trembling on the armrests. I pressed them flat against my thighs. "Why did Brett come forward?" I asked. "Why now?" Kate's expression shifted slightly, not soft exactly, but honest. "He said he watched Oliver's video Friday night, sat in his kitchen with his 3-year-old daughter asleep down the hall, and watched a 5-year-old boy tell the truth into a microphone." She paused. "He said he thought about his daughter, about what it would look like if someone did to her mother what he had been doing to you." Something complicated moved through my chest. Not forgiveness, it was far too early and far too much for that, but something adjacent to understanding. "He gave a full sworn statement," I asked. "Every message, every date, every instruction Derek gave him, including the one that told him to track your lawyer appointment in January." Kate's eyes were steady on mine. "And the Sunday night message asking him to obstruct." Brett understood that if he stayed quiet, he was no longer just complicit in what Derek had already done, he was actively committing a crime himself. "Dr. Webb," I said suddenly. "What happened with Webb?" Kate allowed herself the smallest possible smile. "Dr. Marcus Webb sent a written refusal to Derek last week. But more than that, he filed a report with the Georgia Composite Board of Professional Counselors." She folded her hands on the desk. "The board licenses and disciplines mental health professionals in this state. When Derek approached Webb and asked him to conduct an evaluation with a predetermined outcome, essentially to falsify a professional psychological assessment, that was a direct violation of the ethical code Webb is bound by. He had a legal and professional obligation to report it." "So Webb is testifying against me," I said carefully. "Webb is testifying for you," Kate said. "He's going on record to say that Derek attempted to corrupt the evaluation process. That alone discredits the entire psychological column of Derek's strategy." She let that land. "Claire, with Brett's statement, Webb's report, Ms. Walsh's notebook, your father's recording from the hospital, visit Tom Brewer's financial documentation, and 67 pages of archived Instagram content, I'm filing everything this afternoon. All 114 pages. Judge Hargrove will have it before end of business today." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside Peachtree Street was doing what Peachtree Street always did, moving indifferent, full of people who had no idea what was happening in this office on the 14th floor. 114 pages, I said. "And growing," Kate said. "Tom Brewer isn't finished yet." My phone buzzed on the table, a text from Jess. "Someone leaked the account freeze order to a financial news account. It's already out. I turned around. The account is frozen. Judge Hargrove signed the emergency freeze order at 4:30 this afternoon, Kate said. Derek attempted a transfer at 5:47. It was declined. She looked at me with the measured satisfaction of someone watching a blueprint come together exactly as designed. He called his attorney, went to voicemail. Standing there in that office with 17 verdicts on the wall and 114 pages of truth on Kate's desk, I felt the cold, purposeful thing in my chest settle into something that finally had a shape. What comes next? I asked. Now, Kate said, we let him understand exactly what he built. My parents' house in Decatur has smelled the same since I was 7 years old. Linda's fabric softener, the lavender kind she has used for 30 years without ever considering switching, and whatever Ray is cooking, which involves, without exception, more garlic than any reasonable person would call for. There is nowhere on earth that has ever felt more completely like safety. Which is exactly why when my mother called that Saturday afternoon and said, Claire, Derek's mother just showed up at our front door, I got in the car without putting my shoes on properly and drove the 20 minutes to Decatur with my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my jaw. Ray's truck was already in the driveway. He met me at the front door, one hand on the frame, voice dropped low. She's been here 20 minutes, he said. Your mother made tea. What does she want? Ray's eyes held mine for exactly 1 second, the particular look of a man who has already assessed the situation and formed a conclusion he isn't ready to say out loud yet. Come inside, he said. We'll find out together. Patricia Harmon was sitting on my parents' floral sofa in a navy blazer and pressed slacks, her Hermes bag beside her on the cushion, like a small, expensive companion. She looked exactly as she always looked, polished, composed, utterly at ease, in a house that was not hers. Linda sat in the armchair across from her, back straight hands, folded a cup of tea on the table beside her that she had absolutely not touched. Claire, Patricia rose slightly, extending her hand with a warm smile. I'm so glad you came. I just wanted to talk. Nothing formal. Nothing formal. The woman had driven 40 minutes to Decatur on a Saturday with a designer handbag to have nothing formal. Sit down, sweetheart, Linda said to me, and her voice was so carefully controlled it told me everything. She was furious. She was frightened, and she had decided that neither one was going to show on her face until she understood what was happening. I sat beside Ray on the love seat. He settled his arm along the back of the couch behind me, not quite touching, just present. I noticed the folded newspaper on the side table next to him. He hadn't looked at it. Patricia folded her hands on her knee, the practiced pose of a woman accustomed to running the temperature of a room. I think we can all agree that what matters most here is Oliver's well-being. She smiled at each of us in turn. This process has been painful for everyone. I understand that, which is why I wanted to have this conversation before things go any further. She reached into her handbag and set a white envelope on the coffee table between us. Derek is in a position to give Oliver the kind of stability that, she paused delicately, is realistically difficult to provide on a teacher's salary. This is $20,000. She touched the envelope with 2 fingers. For Claire, to help her get back on her feet after she agrees to let Derek have primary custody. Voluntarily. No court dates, no depositions, no drawn-out process. Everyone moves forward. The room went so completely still I could hear the kitchen clock ticking from the next room. Linda set her teacup down on its saucer with a sound like a small, precise period at the end of a sentence. She looked at the envelope on the coffee table. Then she looked at Patricia with an expression I had never in my life seen on my mother's face, something that had passed through anger entirely and come out the other side as something colder and more absolute. Are you sitting in my living room? Linda said, her voice dropping to a register I didn't know she had, offering my daughter money to sign her child away. Patricia's chin lifted slightly. Linda, I'm offering Claire a chance to avoid. You need to leave my house. The words landed like the door slamming. Patricia blinked, and for just a fraction of a second the composure cracked. A flash of something hot and startled moved through her eyes before the mask came back up smooth and settled. She reached for the envelope. Think carefully, Claire, Patricia said, looking directly at me as she stood. Her voice was low and final, the tone of someone reading the last line of a contract. This offer has an expiration date. Once things proceed further, There won't be another conversation like this one. My jaw ached from how hard I was holding it. My chest burned with everything I was keeping behind my teeth, the file, the 47 pages, the recordings, the chewed-up months of my life, and I kept every single word of it exactly where it was. Patricia walked to the front door. It closed behind her with a soft, decisive click. The moment it shut, Linda pressed both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders shook once, a single hard tremor she couldn't stop, and then she was on her feet, crossing the room, pulling me into her arms with a fierceness that made it impossible to breathe. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice muffled and thick. "Baby, I am so sorry we didn't know sooner. I'm so sorry you carried this alone." "Mom!" My throat seized completely. I held on to her and felt my eyes burn so badly the room blurred. "You should have told us," Linda said, pulling back to look at my face, her own eyes streaming. "You should have told us the minute you found that file." "I didn't want to scare you," I managed. "We're your parents," Linda said, fiercely gripping both my arms. "Being scared for you is our job. That's what we signed up for." Ray had not moved from the love seat. I looked at him through blurring eyes. He was looking back at me with an expression so stripped of pretense, so completely without the careful management of feeling that men, his generation, sometimes wrapped around the things that hurt them most, that it undid me entirely. "Dad," I said, and my voice broke on the word. "Hey." Ray reached over to the side table and picked up the newspaper. Underneath it, face up on the polished wood, was his phone. The screen showed a voice memo application. The red bar was still running. "Timestamp 41 minutes, 17 seconds. "When did you start?" I whispered. Ray looked at me steadily when she sat down. The sound that came out of me wasn't a cry and wasn't a laugh. It came from somewhere so deep and compressed, it didn't have a name. My hands flew to my face. My whole body shook with it. "Georgia allows any party in a conversation to record it without telling the other person," Ray said, calm as a man reading a grocery list. "I looked it up Thursday night, just in case." He set the phone on the coffee table between us, the voice memo still running, then reached over and stopped it. I got every word, Claire. Every single word she said. I called Kate from the driveway before I'd even reached my car, hand still trembling, voice still unsteady. "She offered me $20,000 to voluntarily surrender primary custody," I said the moment Kate picked up. Kate was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "Did your father record it?" 41 minutes, I said. "All of it. Send it to me tonight." Kate's voice had shifted into something precise and purposeful. "Claire Patricia Harmon just walked into your parents' living room and handed us attempted improper influence of a custody proceeding in Georgia, offering financial consideration to induce a party to relinquish custody rights outside of a court proceeding is grounds for sanctions and can rise to criminal contempt." A pause. "The Brittany folder is now 81 pages, and we are not done yet." I stood in my parents' driveway in the warm June evening, the gardenias blooming along the fence next door, the neighborhood quiet and ordinary around me. 81 pages, and not done yet. I walked back inside where Oliver was at the kitchen table asking Ray if he could have one more piece of garlic bread, and Ray was saying he'd have to check with his mother, and Oliver was already looking at me with the particular expression of a 5-year-old who has calculated the odds and feels fairly confident. "Mommy," he said, "did you know garlic is a vegetable?" "I heard something about that," I said. "So technically—" "One more piece," I said, "small one." Oliver's face lit up like every good thing in the world had just been confirmed simultaneously. And for 30 seconds in my parents' kitchen that smelled like lavender and garlic, and 30 years of the same choices made with love, I let that be the only thing. The call came at 8:07 Monday morning. Oliver was still asleep. I could hear him breathing through the baby monitor I still kept on the kitchen counter, out of habit, even though he was 5 now and had opinions about being called a baby. I was on my second cup of coffee, standing at the window, watching the street below come to life when my phone buzzed on the counter and Tom Brewer's name appeared on the screen. I picked it up immediately. "Claire." His voice had that particular flatness of someone who has found something serious and is choosing his words with both hands. "I need you in Kate's office this morning. Are you free by 9? My stomach pulled tight. "How bad is it?" "I'd rather walk you through the documents in person." A brief pause. "Bring Jess." I called Jess before I even set the phone down. She answered on the second ring, already awake, voice sharp and alert. What happened? Tom wants us at Kate's by 9. He said bring you specifically. I heard her exhale, not a sigh, something more controlled than that. I'll be at your door in 30 minutes. Get Oliver to your mom's first. My mother, Linda, lived 12 minutes away in Decatur and asked exactly 0 questions when I showed up at her door at 8:40 with Oliver in his dinosaur backpack. She just pulled him inside, looked at my face over his head, and said quietly, "Go do what you need to do." I squeezed her hand so hard my knuckles went white. Kate Sullivan's conference room on Peachtree Street smelled like fresh coffee and old paper, a combination I had come to associate with either good strategy or bad news, sometimes both at once. Tom was already seated at the table when Jess and I walked in, a thick stack of flagged documents arranged in front of him, with the precision of someone who had been working since before sunrise. Kate stood by the window, arms crossed, expression measured. "Sit down," Kate said. Not unkind. Just the voice of someone who has learned that delivering serious information standing up creates unnecessary drama. Jess and I sat. Jess immediately reached toward the document stack, then pulled her hand back and looked at Tom instead. "Walk us through it." Tom slid the first document across the table. Property refinance agreement, October 2023, $82,000 pulled from equity on the Buckhead apartment. He pointed to the signature block on page 3. "That is listed as your signature, Claire." I looked at it. My name printed and signed. The handwriting close enough to fool someone who had only seen my signature a handful of times, the same looping first letter, the same compressed last name. But the C was wrong. I never closed the loop that far down. My chest went tight. "That is not my signature." "We know," Tom said. He slid the second document over without pausing. "Business operating agreement for a Delaware LLC, Harmon Horizon Partners, registered August 2022. You are listed as co-owner. Your signature appears on the founding documents on 2 separate pages." Jess's head came up fast. "I have never heard of Harmon Horizon Partners," I said. My voice stayed level, but my hands were pressing flat against my thighs under the table, hard enough to feel the seam of my jeans. "I have never signed anything related to an LLC. I didn't know it existed. That is the second instance of forgery." Tom pulled the third document and set it in front of me. "Personal loan agreement. $95,000 borrowed against joint marital assets, both Derek's signature and yours, dated March 2024. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. "The full amount was transferred to Brittany Caldwell's personal bank account within 72 hours of signing." The room tilted. That was the only way I could describe it. Everything stayed physically still, but the air pressure changed, and my ears started ringing faintly. Jess made a sound beside me, short and involuntary, like she'd been punched softly in the sternum. "He forged her signature," Jess said. Her voice had gone very precise, the way it did when she was furious, but refusing to let fury run ahead of facts. "3 times, to funnel money to his girlfriend. 3 documented instances," Kate confirmed, stepping away from the window and sitting across from me. She looked directly at my face, not past it, not at the documents, at me, with the kind of eye contact that means what follows is important. Under OCGA Section 16-9-1, each count of felony forgery carries 1 to 15 years, 3 counts, and each one is tied to a separate financial transaction. She paused. "But that is not the part I need you to brace for." My throat tightened. "Tell me." Tom opened the last section of the stack, a spreadsheet printout dense with figures. Harmon Horizon Partners wasn't just a vehicle for the LLC fees. It carried a credit line maxed out at $340,000 secured against your shared marital assets as collateral. He set his pen down carefully. "You had no knowledge of it. Your name was forged onto the collateral agreement, which means right now that debt is technically joint." The number hit me like cold water thrown directly at my face. My eyes went hot, and a tear broke before I could stop it. I pressed the back of my hand against my cheekbone immediately, jaw clenched, refusing to fall apart at this table. $340,000. Against our home. Against Oliver's home. That debt does not stay joint, Kate said, voice firm and immediate, like she had timed the response to meet the emotion exactly. That is what Thursday's hearing is for. We have 3 forged signatures, a forensic accountant ready to testify, and documented transfers to a third party. She leaned forward slightly. Claire, you are not the defendant in this story anymore. You are the victim of financial fraud. And there is one more thing. She opened a separate folder and slid a single page across to me. Patricia Harmon's name appears as a witness signature on 2 of these 3 documents. My breath stopped. Jess said very quietly, she knew. The meeting with Patricia Harmon was Kate's idea. When she proposed it Tuesday morning, I told her plainly that I thought it was a mistake, that Patricia had spent 3 years looking through me like I was a smudge on a window, and I had no reason to believe Monday was going to be different. Kate let me finish, nodded once, and said, "You're not going there to make peace with her. You're going there to give her a choice before a judge makes it for her." She slid a printed cooperation agreement across the desk toward me. There's a difference. I brought Jess anyway. Kate had asked me not to said it might read as aggressive. I said Jess was there for me, not for strategy, and Kate looked at us both for a moment, then picked up her files and said, "Fine, but she doesn't speak unless I say so." Jess said, "Understood," in a tone that meant she absolutely reserved the right. Patricia Harmon arrived at Kate's office at 10 o'clock Tuesday morning wearing a pearl gray blazer and the particular expression of a woman who has rehearsed composure so long it has become structural. She was 61 years old, trim, with Derek's same jaw and Derek's same habit of letting her eyes assess a room before the rest of her committed to entering it. She looked at me when she walked in. Her chin lifted slightly. "Claire," she said. "Patricia," I said. We sat down on opposite sides of the conference table. Kate opened her folder. Jess sat beside me with her hands folded and her jaw set, and I could feel the effort it was costing her to stay quiet. "Mrs. Harmon," Kate began, "thank you for coming in voluntarily. I want to be direct with you about why we asked." She slid copies of the 3 forged documents across the table. "Your signature appears as a witness on the October 2023 refinance agreement and the March 2024 personal loan. Both documents are the subject of a felony forgery investigation." Patricia's eyes moved to the pages. Something in her face shifted, a tightening around the mouth, the kind of micro-expression that isn't practiced well enough to disappear completely. Her fingers touched the edge of the October 2023 document, then pulled back. "I signed as a witness," she said carefully. "That doesn't mean I knew the other signature was forged." "That is a legally meaningful distinction," Kate said, "and it is exactly what we want to discuss with you." She leaned forward, steady and unhurried. "If you were present when those documents were signed, and you witnessed what you believed was Claire's genuine signature, that is one situation. If you witnessed Derek Harmon sign Claire's name while she was not present, that is a different situation entirely. The law treats those 2 things very differently." Patricia's jaw tightened. She pressed her lips together hard, the effort of it visible, that specific tight-lipped expression of someone swallowing something down. Her eyes moved to me across the table, and for a moment, they held something I hadn't seen from her in years, maybe ever. Not warmth, something rawer than that. Something that looked almost like guilt. "He told me it was a joint decision," she said. Her voice came out lower than before, rougher at the edges. "He said you had both agreed to restructure the finances, and that you couldn't be there to sign in person." My chest cracked open. The words landed with a specific kind of pain. Not rage, not shock, just a deep bone-level ache for the woman I had been in 2023, who had sat in that apartment trusting her husband while he was downstairs lying to his mother about where she was. My eyes burned. I pressed my thumbnail hard into my palm and kept my face steady. "Patricia," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. "I was home. I was in the apartment. He told me he was meeting you for dinner." My throat tightened around the next words. "I made Oliver's lunch while your son was forging my name in a conference room 8 blocks away." Patricia's composure broke. It didn't shatter dramatically, it fractured quietly, a small tremor in her lower lip, the sudden brightness of tears that she clearly had not given herself permission to cry. She pressed two fingers to her mouth and breathed through her nose sharply, like she was physically pushing emotion back into its container. "I didn't know," she said. The words came out thick. "Claire, I genuinely did not know." "I believe you," I said, and I meant it, which surprised me more than anything else in that room. Jess exhaled beside me, long and controlled. Kate slid the cooperation agreement across the table. "Mrs. Harmon, this document allows you to provide a formal statement confirming the circumstances of your witness signatures on both documents. In exchange, the DA's office, who will be reviewing this case, will receive your cooperation on record. This is the cleanest path available to you." She paused. "The alternative is that when this case goes to hearing Thursday, your name appears on two pieces of evidence in a felony forgery proceeding, and you answer questions without the protection of a prior cooperation agreement." Patricia looked at the document. Her hand was trembling, slightly visible at the wrist, the way fine tremors are when they come from stress rather than cold. She picked up the pen Kate had set beside the stack. "If I sign this," she said slowly, "what happens to Derek? That," Kate said, "is for the court to determine." Patricia looked at me one more time. Her eyes were wet. She breathed in, breathed out, and said, "He's my son." Her voice broke on the last word just slightly, like a seam giving way under pressure it was never designed to hold. "He is my son, and I am so sorry, Claire, for all of it." My own throat closed so hard it hurt. I nodded once because speaking would have cost me something I couldn't afford to spend in this room. Patricia Harmon lowered the pen to the cooperation agreement and signed her name. The Fulton County Superior Courthouse on Pryor Street looked exactly the same as it had every other time I had walked through its doors. Pale stone, high ceilings, the particular stillness of a building where consequences live permanently in the walls. But my legs felt different this time. Not the weak, uncertain kind of different. The kind that comes from knowing exactly what you are carrying and trusting that it is enough. Kate walked beside me in her dark charcoal suit heels, precise on the marble floor, her leather portfolio tucked under one arm. She had not said anything since the elevator. That was how I had learned to read her. Over the past 5 months, Kate Sullivan talked constantly when she was building strategy, and went quiet only when the strategy was complete and it was time to execute. Jess squeezed my arm at the courtroom door. "You good?" "I'm terrified," I said honestly. "But I'm ready." "Same thing," she said. "Go." Courtroom 14B had 12 rows of gallery seating, most of them occupied by the quiet machinery of a working courthouse, clerks, other attorneys, a woman in the third row taking notes in a yellow legal pad. Derek was already seated at the respondent's table when we entered, his attorney, Marcus Lee. Beside him, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with a reputation for aggressive procedural delays. Derek was in his navy suit, the same one from the school play. He looked up when I walked in, and something moved across his face, not guilt, not yet, but something adjacent to it. The first crack in the composure he had been maintaining for 6 months. I sat down, folded my hands on the table, and breathed from the bottom of my lungs. Judge Eleanor Marsh entered at 9:02 a.m. She was 55, platinum-haired, with the kind of unhurried authority that doesn't need volume to fill a room. She sat, arranged her materials, and looked at both tables with equal measurement before she spoke. "We're here on an emergency motion in the matter of Harmon versus Harmon," she said. "Ms. Sullivan, you filed the amended petition. You have the floor." Kate stood. "Thank you, Your Honor." She opened her portfolio and began laying documents on the evidence table, 3 flagged sets each with a cover sheet in red. "The petitioner is presenting 3 instances of felony forgery under OCGA Section 16-9-1 each, tied to a separate financial instrument executed during the marriage. The respondent, Derek Harmon, forged the petitioner's signature on a property refinance agreement in October 2023, a business LLC founding document in August 2022, and a personal loan agreement in March 2024. Total financial exposure from these 3 instruments: $432,000, including a $340,000 credit line secured against joint marital assets without the petitioner's knowledge or consent. Marcus Lee was on his feet immediately. Objection to the characterization. Your Honor, these are allegations, not findings. They will be findings by the time forensic testimony concludes, Mr. Lee, Kate said, not raising her voice by a single degree. She turned to the evidence table. We are also presenting a cooperation agreement signed voluntarily by Patricia Harmon, the respondent's mother, who witnessed 2 of the 3 documents and has provided a sworn statement confirming that the petitioner was not present during signing. The room shifted. I felt it, a collective reorientation, like pressure changing before a storm. I kept my eyes on Judge Marsh. Derek's jaw tightened visibly from across the room. He leaned toward Marcus Lee and said something low and fast. Lee put one hand up slightly, the universal lawyer gesture for "not now, stop talking." Your Honor, Kate continued, we are also presenting financial forensic testimony from certified accountant Thomas Brewer, who has traced the proceeds of these 3 instruments to accounts associated with a third party, Brittany Caldwell, over a 14-month period. We request immediate reassignment of the $340,000 debt to the respondent's sole liability, an emergency freeze on any remaining joint financial instruments, and a temporary custody order granting the petitioner primary physical custody of Oliver Harmon, age 5, pending final settlement. Judge Marsh looked at Marcus Lee. Counselor. Response. Lee stood slowly. He was good. I had done my research, but good only gets you so far when the other side has 3 forged documents, a forensic accountant, and the respondent's own mother on a cooperation agreement. Your Honor, the respondent maintains that all financial decisions were made jointly and that the signatures in question were executed with the petitioner's full knowledge. Vamos, men. Mr. Lee. Judge Marsh's voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. Are you prepared to call witnesses today to support that position? A pause. We would request a continuance to. Motion for continuance is denied. Judge Marsh made a note. We have forensic documentation, a cooperation statement from a material witness, and a minor child whose residential situation requires immediate clarity. We are proceeding. She looked at Tom Brewer, seated in the gallery. Mr. Brewer, you will be called to the stand in approximately 15 minutes. Ms. Sullivan, continue. My throat tightened so hard it ached. Beside me, Kate's hand moved briefly to the edge of my file and pressed at once, not a touch, just a point of contact, steady and firm. Keep breathing. Keep going. Tom took the stand and spent 22 minutes walking Judge Marsh through every transfer, every forged signature, cross-referenced against Claire's genuine signature samples, every dollar that had moved from joint marital assets into Harmon Horizon Partners, and from there into Brittany Caldwell's accounts. He spoke the way forensic accountants speak, clear, sequential, without drama, which made it more devastating than drama ever could have been. Derek's attorney objected 4 times. Judge Marsh sustained none of them. When Tom stepped down, the room held that particular charged stillness of a space where something has just been decided even before the official words. Judge Marsh reviewed her notes for 90 seconds. I counted, then looked up. In the matter of temporary custody pending final settlement, she said, the court finds sufficient cause to grant the petitioner primary physical custody of Oliver Harmon, effective immediately. The respondent is granted supervised visitation 2 hours weekly at a court-approved location pending a full psychological evaluation and final hearing. She set her pen down. Regarding the financial instruments, the $340,000 debt tied to Harmon Horizon Partners is hereby temporarily reassigned to the respondent's sole liability, pending final ruling. A forensic audit of all joint accounts is ordered within 30 days. She looked at Derek directly. Mr. Harmon, this court takes the falsification of legal documents extremely seriously. The district attorney's office will receive a copy of today's evidence record. Derek's face had gone the particular gray of a man hearing a door close on something he cannot reopen. His hands were flat on the table. His attorney was writing furiously. I pressed my palm over my mouth. My shoulders shook once, just once, and then Jess's arm came around me from the side, pulling me in hard, and I let myself cry. Not the broken kind. The kind that comes when something you have been holding for 3 years finally has somewhere to land. "We got it," Kate said quietly beside me. "We got him." December in Atlanta came in soft that year. No ice, no hard freeze, just the particular gray-gold quality of southern winter light that makes everything look like the last frame of a film you want to watch again. Oliver had been asking about a Christmas tree since the first week of November, and I had told him we would get one on the first Saturday of December, and he had marked it on his Paw Patrol calendar in red marker and checked it every single morning since. We got the tree on December 6th. Oliver picked it himself, a Douglas fir 2 feet taller than what I had planned for our apartment, and when I told him it might not fit, he looked up at it with complete 5-year-old certainty and said, "It'll fit, Mommy. We just pushed the couch a little." We pushed the couch a little. The tree fit. "I told you," he said, hands on his hips, deeply satisfied with himself. "You told me." I agreed. My chest was so full it almost hurt. The good kind of hurt, the kind that means something real is living there. The final divorce settlement had come through on November 18th. Kate had called me at 7:42 a.m., and I had been standing in the kitchen making Oliver's lunch, and when she said, "It's done, Claire," I had to sit down on the kitchen floor because my legs stopped working properly. Just folded. I sat there with my back against the cabinet and cried so hard. Oliver came running from his bedroom in his socks and kneeled down beside me and put both small hands on my face and said, "Mommy, are you okay? Do you need a Band-Aid?" I had laughed through the crying, which made me cry harder. "I'm okay, baby," I'd told him. "These are the good tears." He had considered this seriously. Like when we watched the dog movie. Exactly like that. He had nodded satisfied and gone back to his room to find his shoes. The settlement terms were everything Kate had fought for. Primary physical custody to me with Derek, granted supervised visitation every other Saturday at a court-approved family center, 2 hours a supervisor present. The $340,000 debt from Harmon Horizon Partners assigned entirely to Derek. The Buckhead apartment equity minus legal fees divided with 60% to me as compensation for the forged refinance agreement. The forensic audit had uncovered 2 additional accounts Derek hadn't disclosed. Those assets were folded into the settlement as well. Total, Derek walked away with significantly less than he had planned, and a referral to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office on 3 counts of felony forgery under OCGA, Section 1691. His attorney had negotiated a plea agreement in October, 2 years probation, full financial restitution, and a permanent record that would follow him through every professional background check for the rest of his working life. Brittany Caldwell had deleted her social media accounts 4 days after the school play went viral. Her brand partnerships had terminated within a week. The last I had heard through Jess, who heard it through someone else entirely, she had moved out of Atlanta by August. I did not feel triumphant about any of that. I want to be honest about that. I felt tired mostly. Tired in the way that only comes after you have been in a sustained fight for a very long time, the kind of tired that isn't bad, just heavy, like your body finally believes it is safe enough to rest. Jess came over on the evening of December 6th after the tree was up, and Oliver was in his pajamas carrying a bottle of wine and a container of her mother's pecan cookies that she handed to Oliver first, which he accepted with both hands and said, "Thank you, Aunt Jess. These are my favorites," with the particular sincerity of a child who means exactly what he says. "He is the best person I know," Jess said, watching him carry the cookies to the kitchen counter with tremendous concentration. "He really is," I said. We sat on the couch with the tree lit and Oliver at our feet building something elaborate with his Duplo blocks, explaining its structural logic to us at length. Jess poured 2 glasses and handed one to me and said, "So, how are you?" Not the legal answer, the real one. I thought about it honestly. "Some days are still hard," I said. "The mornings when he asks about Daddy, those are hard. I don't have a clean answer for a 5-year-old about why his father chose what he chose." "What do you tell him?" "I tell him his dad loves him in his own way. and that some grown-up things are complicated, and that Oliver is never ever the reason. I wrapped both hands around my wine glass. And then he usually asks for a snack and moves on because he's 5, and 5-year-olds are actually very good at living in the present. Jess smiled, the real one, the kind that reaches her eyes and stays. He gets that from you. He gets that from himself. I looked at Oliver, who had now added a second story to his structure and was narrating its purpose with complete authority. My throat tightened with something that was not pain. He was brave before I was. He stood up in front of 4,000 people when he was 5 years old because he wanted his mom in her seat. My voice went rough. I'm the one learning from him. Jess touched her glass to mine. To Oliver. To Oliver, I said. He looked up immediately when he heard his name. What did I do something? Nothing bad, I said. We were just saying you're pretty great. He considered this. I know, he said seriously, and went back to his blocks. Jess laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. I laughed with her, the kind of full-body laugh that starts in the stomach and doesn't stop until your eyes water, and for once the water in my eyes had nothing to do with anything breaking. It was just joy, simple and specific, and entirely mine in a small apartment with a too-tall Christmas tree, and the best 5-year-old in Atlanta, explaining the structural integrity of a Duplo building to no one in particular. I had not known how to picture what after looked like. Now I was living inside it. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. People ask me how I survived what I now recognize as the deepest family betrayal I have ever lived through a slow, calculated dismantling of my identity, my finances, and my role as a mother. Honestly, I don't have a clean answer. What I have is this. There was one night in January, sitting on my kitchen floor with 47 pages spread around me, when I said out loud to no one, or maybe to God, I cannot carry this alone. And somehow the next morning, I got up anyway. I believe that wasn't coincidence. That was grace. Here is what I wish someone had told me earlier. Trust the patterns, not the promises. Family betrayal doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, dressed in a pressed shirt and a practiced smile. When someone shows you who they are across 3 years of small, consistent choices, believe them the first time. Don't do what I did. Don't shrink yourself into someone easier to deceive. Don't confuse loyalty with silence. Because family betrayal at this level doesn't just break your heart, it restructures who you are at the foundation. My personal opinion. Family revenge is not what movies make it look like. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. The first real family revenge I felt wasn't filing the petition. It was sitting in the seat my 5-year-old made for me with a crayon and a lopsided cat, and refusing to move one single inch. The most complete family revenge I ever experienced wasn't inside that courtroom on Pryor Street. It was December. A too-tall Christmas tree, Oliver's hands on his hips saying, I told you it would fit, and realizing I had built something nobody could forge a signature to take away. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Drop a comment and tell me what moment hit you hardest. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because every story I bring here is worth staying until the very last word. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching all the way to the end. You have no idea how much it means. A gentle note: stories on this channel contain fictional elements crafted for educational and storytelling purposes. If this content isn't the right fit for you, that is completely valid. Step away and choose what nourishes you best.